How are you? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to this live. It's good to be back and live with you talking about language learning. And today I wanted to talk about reality and what we accept or reject, or what we find difficult to entertain as an idea as to why things are the way they are and what we can do and what we can't do. And this is linked in part to my last update, which was about New Year's resolutions and why I don't believe in them. Whilst they can work for some people, and I recognize that, I don't think that they're necessarily the best way of sort of deciding a life change or making a big decision about what we're going to do and when. Now, I want to sort of start with a story and say, imagine that I didn't think the way I think about New Year's resolutions, and actually I like them, and I set myself New Year's resolutions to learn a new language, to do something very special or particular, starting at the beginning of the year, 2023. Now, I could have done that. Now, what actually happened to me at the start of 2023 is I was not very well. I felt quite sick. I wasn't able to really take on much study and do very much of anything. And I also had an awful lot of things to catch up on from trips that I'd made that I then needed to follow up. And so my reality was not that I could take on a new language or a heavy study regime or even do much of anything else. And here we are getting towards the end of January 2023. What would I then do? Wait for another month or another year, or what would I do? Feel like I failed because the year's already ticking away and I've not really achieved much of anything? No, absolutely not. And this is why I think it's extremely important. And one of the things that actually I think some people do talk about, but I don't think we really internalize it or take it very seriously. And that is that it's fine for things not to go quite right. And it's fine to be kind to oneself. And it's fine to half the amount that we think we should have as a minimum. Sometimes we require that. I have had conversations with a number of people over the past couple of weeks. And one of the things that I decided from a conversation was, okay, I asked the question, what's your minimum that you want to achieve? What do you want to do? And how much do you think that will take? And the response to that was, I want to do a certain number of words a year. I think this was, I want to cover 800 words in a year, which sounds reasonable, right? It sounds reasonable. And that would be what, three words a day, pretty much over the year, which sounds fine. Okay, it sounds fine, but these are words that you want to then internalize. Now, learning a language is not like you just look at a word and then that's it. Depending on the language you're learning, it may be easier or harder to learn those words and to internalize them, to be able to use them actively. And if you do a week's worth of words, and let's say you do 2 or 3, and you get to the end of the week and you've covered 20 to 30 words in that week, great. If you can then use them. What happens though if you're sick for that week and the week after and the week after that, or you have a business trip or you need to do something else, you've got other things going on? What happens? Well, those words build up. And before you know it, you've got 120 words. Maybe you have 90, maybe you've missed 3 weeks, maybe you have 60, but you've still got those words that have built up that you haven't done. What happens then is that that becomes a stress and it becomes a pressure point for your learning, because the words for the week when you start back are still there. So what actually happens is you have this blockage of what you can and can't do, and that applies pressure to you. It decreases your motivation and it makes you feel like you're failing. And so it's always safer to have expectations of yourself that you would maybe expect of other people as well. And realistically, would you say to somebody that it's reasonable within a week because they've been sick for a couple of weeks because they had a work thing that they had to go to learn 150 words or 120 words, however many words it would be, with the additional words missed within a week or 2 weeks? How do you then rebalance that? And if you wouldn't say it to other people, then why would you say it to yourself? So, can you see how I find that what we do with ourselves and with our time and with this pressure that we put on ourselves, that we often neglect what our reality actually dictates. And what tends to happen as a consequence of that is we just stop. We don't bother anymore. And this isn't a thing that I think needs to be a yes or no, a black or white, an on or an off. This can be something where we say, actually, do you know what? I need to reevaluate and recalibrate. And we need to think about what's realistic for the whole year, for all eventualities, for all times of day, of all different things that can happen and go on when you're studying. So if you take that 800 words and you say, okay, let's make it a word a day, you can round it up to 400. It's even that is just a big help to saying, okay, well, I can achieve that one a day. And if I miss a week, it's only 7 words. It's not 30 or 20 or however many you need to be able to get to the 800. And all of a sudden, you've made it a lot more doable and achievable. And missing a little bit doesn't seem as bad. So when you come back, you don't feel as pressured. Even better would be to say, I missed a week, and that's that. And so my minimum of what I wanted needs to be readjusted to less. That would be the ideal, because then we're not putting that pressure on ourselves to do lots of extra work that we actually can't afford to do or can't get in. We could have weeks where we can do a bit more, and that's fine, but not always. And so I just wanted to kind of come on and say, I hope your years are going well, this 2023. And if you celebrate Chinese New Year, 新年快乐. I hope you have a very prosperous year of the rabbit. And I really hope that your goals for this year are going well. But at the same time, be kind to yourselves. And if you did choose to do and take on New Year's resolutions, because that's a culturally significant thing for you, then I'm not going to judge you on that. That's entirely up to you. My personal feelings on New Year's resolutions don't really matter at all to anyone apart from me, because that's all that really they should matter to. I should only go with what's authentic for me. And if it strikes a chord with you, then I hope that my thoughts and my reasonings help you to reconcile any issues that you feel surrounding that kind of activity of setting these goals, and that it helps you to meet your own learning targets and what you want to achieve within the months and years of your study. So that was basically all I wanted to say. And so I'm happy to sort of stay around and talk a little bit more, but I wanted to kind of make sure that I came on to say hello. I know I haven't been around as much since the sort of the end of last year, and partly because I was traveling, partly because I wasn't so well, and I wanted to also sort of take the time myself to practice what I preach. I don't particularly like forcing myself to do things when I'm not comfortable. I don't particularly like to sort of do things that are not healthy for me. So I decided that I would not, and I have commented on a few things on social media, but that's about as far as it goes. And I've done a few very easy things, but I've not done so much. So yes, I'm very glad to be here and to be talking to you. Next week, I'm not sure if I'll be around next week, but we'll see. But I hope that I will be able to start making these more regular again. And my other idea, actually, for this year is to go down the road that I talked about once last year, and that is to potentially interview different people, and to do that through my Patreon page. So actually have you join the Patreon page and be able to ask questions as well live, and have this as more of a call in. So I could do that with guests. I could do that just with you. If you're interested in that, please do reach out and let me know. And you can always get in touch via Patreon. The link will be it's on my Speaking Fluently page, but also it will be in the description. So you can reach out, you can ask questions about language learning that are specific to you, of course, but also I will set up these regular chats, discussions where we talk, and you can ask your questions as well and interact with me in a live environment, as well as obviously this is all written, but you'll be able to talk to me and also talk to any guests that I have to discuss language learning or any other topics that we find interesting. So yeah. Anyway, so here we go. I'm going to have a quick look at the questions because I see there are some nice greetings. Thank you very much. Ahoy, ahoy. Dobrý večer. Dobrý večer. Qual è la lingua preferita? La lingua preferita è il tedesco, senza dubbio. Allora, per me sì. I'm feeling well now. Thank you very much, Eric. Yeah, I'm feeling a lot better. Yeah, I think I had some sort of bug, some sort of bacterial infection, not fortunately not COVID. But yeah, I feel quite good. It's one of those things that, you know, when you feel sick and then you start feeling better, but you don't feel 100% for a while, and because you have other things to carry on with, it kind of zaps your energy, and that's kind of how I was feeling. So yeah, feeling a lot better. Thank you. ¿Cuánto tiempo llevas estudiando español? Tienes un acento perfecto. Gracias. Es que perfecto no, a lo mejor no, porque sí que un hispanoparlante a lo mejor sí que va a saber que no soy de origen de España. Pero sí, bueno, vivía en Francia con malagueño y una gallega, de hecho, y pues pego más al acento andaluz, y por eso sí que hablo así. Y pues en la escuela, desde la edad de, diría, 16 años, empecé a estudiar español, y luego en la universidad también estudiaba español para mi carrera de idioma, y luego me fui para vivir en Francia y luego con hispanoparlantes, y luego en Málaga y en Madrid para estudiar como hispanoparlante también. Y por eso sí que tenía que tener un nivel casi nativo para hacer esto. Ya, let me see. Muchas gracias. Okay. Kan je Fries verstaan omdat je Nederlands kent? Ik kan wel Fries verstaan, ja. Ik heb ook Fries aan de Universiteit van Groningen geleerd. Ja, een beetje, dus is wel een hoe zeg je dat nu? Zoals ja, niet alleen maar een cursus, is wel een andere woord zeggen. Een MOOC is dat. Ja, MOOC of zoiets. En dat is ja een cursus van de Universiteit van Groningen. En daar heb ik eigenlijk een beetje Fries ook geleerd. Dus ja, ik heb al niet alleen maar zo van, ja, niet alleen maar verstaan van het Nederlands, maar ook geleerd. Okay, hello everyone. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up on some of these questions. Ciao, dice quante ore di conversazione a settimana bisogna fare secondo te per arrivare a un livello B2? Depende veramente della qualità también, della qualità dipende molto della qualità della conversazione. Insomma, non è una questione specificamente di quanto stai facendo, insomma potrebbe essere anche una conversazione di base, allora così non vai avanti con la lingua, col livello. Però, devi anche, pensarci bene come vuoi utilizzare la lingua, usare la lingua con un'altra persona. Allora, per quanto riguarda per esempio il vocabolario o la grammatica, perché ci sono delle costruzioni grammaticali che devi veramente imparare bene. Per fare questo devi usare queste costruzioni nella lingua stessa, e per fare questo devi avere anche qualche tema, in particolare per poter, usare la lingua in questo modo. Quindi, è sempre difficile dire, quante volte a settimana, perché io potrei per esempio, parlare una lingua ogni giorno, ma se questo fosse un livello di parlare particolarmente basso, come per esempio, di solito in un negozio di A2, B1, allora io come potrei avanzare con il livello B2? Perché per il B2 e per il C1, ci vuole un po' di più. Non è soltanto una questione di praticare la lingua, è veramente una questione di, ehm, avere una conoscenza più profonda. Quindi per approfondire più nella lingua stessa devi veramente, fare molta attenzione a quello che fai. E quindi questo vuol dire la manipolazione della grammatica, della lingua stessa e anche il vocabolario. Allora per questo motivo è un po' difficile dirlo così, però, spero che vada bene così, questa spiegazione. Per spiegare meglio, ci vuole un po' più di tempo, anche, particolarmente per esempio se devi, abbordare qualche tema in particolare, se sai per esempio devi essere anche conoscente di quello che sai, che quello che non sai fare o dire in una lingua. Questo è anche molto importante. Okay, let me see. I really these smooth transitions from one language to another. That wasn't very unfortunately, that transition was probably the least, smooth it's been in a while, but thank you. Um, Let me see. Usually my transitions are fairly okay from one language to another, and that's because I used to work using, many languages on the phone, so I had to, speak different languages depending on which country was indicated on the display on the phone. So if I didn't, then it would be a disaster really for work. But, uh, I haven't had to do that so much recently, although I do often still, change languages quite often, but not like I did before. So every now and again, yeah, there can be my brain might misfire as it just did. I was speaking Spanish, and then all of a sudden I was speaking Italian, so my brain was misfiring a little bit there. I could feel it inside, and it showed in the way I presented my Italian. Just now, I made some mistakes that I wouldn't normally make if I were just speaking Italian, but I did because I'd been speaking Spanish before. And that's completely fine. It's actually quite normal and natural, and I don't worry about that kind of thing. In a professional context, obviously, when you're using them all the time, then it's a very different matter. But um, for a live on a Sunday evening, I'm not really worried. Let me see. Mi español es fluente ahora. Estoy estudiando portugués. Es muy fácil. A ver. Y cuando me hablo, hace tiempo. Sí, hay que practicar los idiomas, sí, claro. Porque luego con YouTube, ya, ya bedankt hoor. Uh, are you able to study two related languages at the same time without confusion? You Well, without confusion, no. There's very likely to be some sort of mixing up of languages. That's normal, and that happens whether the languages are related or not very often. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that, but you can definitely study more than one language at the same time. And I did at university, so I would be terrible if I was saying that you couldn't, when that's what my degree was in. And we had to study different languages at the same time. In fact, I started Italian and Portuguese at the same time at university. And so, yeah, I mean, it worked out okay. Hola, let me see. Hola, España. Hola. Which culture you got to know through being immersed in, which it surprised you most, and in what way? So culture that I learned through being immersed and how it surprised me and in what way, let me think. I'm not sure is the honest answer. I don't think I've been so surprised with a culture, because it tends to be a gradual thing that you learn bits of the culture and then it kind of comes together. And what I think you do is you start understanding the way people communicate. So, for example, living in Germany and in the Netherlands, people are very straightforward and they just tell you what they think. And if they want something, they say they want it. They don't go around the houses about saying, I would like to have, and these kinds of constructions that we're used to in, say, English or other languages. They will just say, I want this, right? Can you give me that? And that's basically it. And in the beginning, those kinds of things seem a little bit sort of direct, but the thing is that it's amazing how quickly they become normal, and actually, I guess also they make sense to me. It's trying to understand other people's logic. So there's a funny turn of phrase in English, and people in the UK talk about this a lot, and that is common sense. And the one thing I'll say about common sense is it tends to be from the speaker's perspective. So what makes sense to the speaker? Now, another person's perspective might be completely different, because their cultural baggage, what they've been taught, what they think is normal and right will be different. And so from their point of view, that isn't common sense. What they think is common sense. And so what I found generally living in different places and living amongst different peoples is that sometimes the common sense that I thought was just normal for me, like the British common sense, the British way of being, started to make less sense. And so there are certain things that heaven forbid anyone of us say this in the UK, but queuing is very British. It's very sort of, if you jump the queue, and people get very angry in the UK, very angry indeed, and sometimes they can even get violent. It's one of the I'm not even exaggerating, unfortunately. I wish I was, but it's really quite extreme sometimes with the queuing. But what people tend to do is they queue and they don't even know what they're queuing for, and that makes zero sense to me now. So after living in the Balkans, for example, where people will just walk to the front of the queue and ask, "Is this for this?" and then decide whether or not they want to join the queue. Okay, sometimes they may try and queue jump. I'm not going to pretend that they don't, but sometimes they do try and queue jump because they know the person or something. But generally speaking, it makes more sense to ask. Why waste half an hour waiting in a queue that you don't need to be in when you could just ask somebody? And in the UK, quite often you will see people wait for however long, and they'll be very annoyed and frustrated, but they won't do anything about it. They just kind of moan to themselves or to the people next to them who will listen in the queue and agree that everyone's awful. And the people that are pushing in, and they may not be pushing in, they may just be asking a question. They're not good for doing that, and it's not the right thing to do, and it doesn't make sense to them. So weirdly, yeah, even that sacred tradition of queuing makes less sense to me than it did. I never thought I would say that in my life, but it's true. But there are other things, not just that as well. There are other things that we do in the UK that make less sense to me now, having lived in other countries. And I always say that languages, speaking a different language doesn't change who I am, but definitely living in different cultures changes my perceptions of things I thought were normal and standard, and what makes sense to me and what doesn't make sense to me changes. And that changes with the experience of living through a different language, in a different culture, looking at things through their eyes and with their take on things. It's just a natural thing. But I think that just becomes part of you instead of a different you, if that makes sense. Because even when I go to the UK, I can't switch that off again. I mean, I see it as I now see it through other people's eyes, right? There we go. That's a very long answer, but I hope that it was at least a useful answer for you. Learning Russian, and I noticed there are different words for movements. Will native speakers understand me if I confuse them, as long as I use the right context? Sebastian, yes and no. So the different words for movement in Russian. So okay, because you have one verb, for example, to go by vehicle and one to walk. It's not going to be the end of the world if you use the wrong one. What does get confusing sometimes, and you can sound correct even, and it's hard for them to correct you, is if you say, for example, I went to school by bike, and you used the imperfective as opposed to the perfective past tense, because one would mean that you did it on a regular basis and the other would mean that you just did it once and that was it. So there are slight differences, but would they understand you 9 times out of 10? I'd say yes. It would not impede an understanding that is similar to what's intended, but there may be some nuances there that are lacking because you're not saying it in a way that they expect for what you necessarily mean, and you can't really check that meaning necessarily either. It depends on the type of interaction you're having. This is one of the biggest things with Slavic languages, actually, that I find people take the longest to get right, is the perfective, imperfective verbs. And in Russian, it's more convoluted because there are definitely more of these, for example, than in Macedonian, Bulgarian, and the Southeast Slavic languages. There are more of these types of differences made in Russian, and well, in Czech as well. Actually, they make them too. But yeah, it will just change the meaning slightly, but they will get what. It's not like you're going to be saying something that means something completely different, but it would not always be the same. Okay. Okay, let me see. Che bello italiano. You're the man. Thank you, Francesco. Здравствуйте, Ричард. Okay, русский язык дует с трудом. Подожди, да. Это тоже трудно на русском, да, тоже. Ну, я думаю, что на глаголе, с глаголем это еще больше по-русски. Но это тоже возможно, да. Но как вы изучили поддержи солнцевское время ушло? Для меня это было как нормально, потому что я только говорил с людьми там в Кишиневе и тоже в России, когда я там был, и в Украине тоже. В Украине я тоже говорил по-русски, потому что я не говорил по-украински, но это было, когда у меня нужно говорить. Я использую только этот израз или грамматику, которая для меня потребна. Я не думаю очень много на этом, как я использую, например, падежи. Я знаю, что я говорю с обшивками, да, на русском, но я знаю тоже, что это на русском и это по-русски. И это потому, что это только как как я изучал, как говорить. И, и это, на самом деле, тоже, когда я говорю на немецком или на сербском, это тоже я могу говорить тоже с ошибками, но, главное дело для меня — это, коммуникация. И поэтому я думаю, что надо читать очень много, это очень важно, и слушать тоже. А когда, они говорят по-русски, ты надо тоже, слышать, как они говорят, как они используют, этот язык. И это тоже очень важно, потому что, ну, после этого у тебя тоже, чувство, как это будет на русском и как это правильно. Ну, надо только время, для этого. Okay. Let me see. Will you ever make a comprehensible input course like Dreaming Spanish or other channels, Richard? Yeah, I mean, if anybody out there has experience doing this kind of thing, feel free to to reach out to me. I'm very happy to think about creating a course or something. I just haven't done it yet. But yeah, if you've got these kinds of expertise and you want to reach out, then feel free to let me know, and let's see what we can organize. Can you teach me how to say? No. uh, it's an inside joke between me and my friend. It's a very strange thing to say, but no, I can't. I don't know what it means, and I've been led down the path too many times with languages to fall for any of these things anymore. Ho sentito dire che non si può imparare una lingua proprio perfettamente dopo l'età di, grosso modo, 13. Secondo lei è così? 13? Insomma, io direi anche che perfettamente non si può imparare mai, perché ci sono delle persone che parlano, per esempio, l'italiano è una lingua, un bell'esempio. Ci sono degli italiani che non parlano, pa quasi tutti gli italiani non parlano perfettamente, 100% del tempo. Ci sono delle persone che sanno bene, se hanno un po' di tempo, per riflessionare un po' sulla grammatica o sul vocabolario che vogliono usare per scrivere o per dire qualcosa. Per la preparazione sempre c'è un po' di tempo, no, ma, parlare perfettamente, questo per me vuol dire che, senza sbagli, senza un uso, sbagliato di una parola, e questo, è quasi impossibile, è impossibile, io direi, per tutti. Ma penso che io voglio interpretare la tua domanda così: parlare una lingua di un modo, che hai questo senso di essere una persona di un livello madrelingua. Questo vuol dire che per te è veramente una lingua come la tua lingua. Linguisticamente c'è questa età, e questa età, potrebbe essere anche fra 11, 13, qualcosa di genere, ma, non è veramente facile dirlo veramente 100% che sia così. Ci sono delle persone che imparano molto bene un'altra lingua e poi possono anche, parlare, comunicare, scrivere, anzi fare quasi tutto in quella lingua. E quindi, questo vuol dire che veramente sono le persone di quel paese? No, questo no. E questa è c'è la domanda psicologica, per esempio, che si sa, io so, per esempio, io sono britannico, io non potrei mai essere italiano. Potrei imparare meglio l'italiano? Sì, perché io potrei andare a vivere in Italia, lavorare lì, parlare con gli italiani ogni giorno, leggere tutto in italiano e fare tutto il possibile per usare la lingua al massimo. Ma psicologicamente rimango britannico, rimango in questa mentalità britannica, perché io sono cresciuto là, quindi per me, questo è la prima cosa, la cosa primordiale insomma, che si sa che queste persone erano di quel paese. La seconda cosa è che, a volte ci sono delle persone che parlano per esempio un dialetto, un modo diverso dello standard della lingua. Quindi, in Italia si vede molto spesso delle persone che parlano un italiano bene, normale, perché hanno studiato l'italiano in italiano a scuola, all'università, ma loro anche parlano un dialetto o un'altra lingua italiana. Quando vuol dire una lingua italiana, vuol dire una lingua d'Italia, quindi, una lingua regionale. Insomma, ehm, ci sono delle persone in Italia che quando parlano italiano, standard, che sto parlando io adesso, ehm, sbagliano molto spesso con la grammatica o anche con il vocabolario, perché non usano, questa versione della lingua ogni giorno. E loro anche a volte sanno bene che non è giusto quello che dicono, ma, non vuol dire nulla, insomma, per quanto riguarda l'uso o il potenziale di usare e manipolare la lingua, insomma, non è così drastico come problema. Ma esiste questo problema. Quindi per uno straniere, entrando o vivendo in altro paese dopo l'età di direi sì, 13 non va male. Uhm, sì, è ancora più difficile perché già, questa persona è già conoscente di un'altra vita in un altro paese, un'altra cultura, un'altra lingua, magari anche o altre lingue, allora, per questo motivo anche sanno, sono conoscenti di questo. E poi, sì, magari anche c'è, questo influsso di parole, o di una grammatica diversa. Quindi sì, potrebbe essere, ma questo non voglio dire che sia un problema veramente importante per la persona o per la società, perché io direi che anche le persone che sono state, tutta la loro vita in Italia, per loro, anche la st lo stesso problema, no, ehm, ehm, solo che per loro psicologicamente possono dire: "Ah, ma io sono di quella regione in Italia dove parliamo un'altra lingua, un altro dialetto", e per questo motivo non ha la stessa reazione delle persone, uhm, con cui stanno parlando. O per loro stesso, che per loro, non c'è, questa reazione interna neanche. Ehm, okay, così. Così penso, ma insomma. Finally caught me live. Yes, nice to see you. Do you generally learn grammar or vocabulary first? I learn everything together. I try to learn it all together. So not I don't separate it. I learn the language, and I try to express myself as I need to express myself, and that will require parts of grammar and parts of just vocabulary that you need to learn. I know you studied Mandarin Chinese in the past. Do you still use it from time to time? Very, 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 very seldom do I speak any Chinese at all. We just don't have many Chinese speakers in the Balkans. And but when I was in Singapore and Malaysia, just a month and a half ago, I did actually use Mandarin, and I was listening to it a lot, and so I did get to use it. I was surprised how much I could understand still, but I wasn't surprised how much I'd forgotten in terms of my active ability in Mandarin. But it was quite weird to be in situations where there would be conversations going on in Chinese, and I would be able to give answers. And yeah, so sometimes yes, but I wouldn't. For example, I'm not particularly good at Mandarin. But yeah, it's kind of there in the background somewhere, but no, I don't use it at all, really. Um, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you too. Today is Lunar Year too. Yes, Happy New Year. 新年快乐. Generally, for people already conversational polyglots tend to recommend just to consume media and talk with people. But do you know any actual course material books for this level? Okay, which level? Sorry, Italo. I don't know if I got the level that you meant. Maybe I've missed the names of the questions and just seen the questions. There are definitely courses for certain languages, but not all courses are the same. Which language and which course is this? Russian again. B2, I think. That's the only one I've seen mentioned with a level. Kevin, French. How do cases in different Slavic languages compare with the cases in Polish? Polish is the first language with cases I'm learning, and I was expecting it to be more complex based on what others have said. So there are a lot of parallels between the cases in Slavic languages. There are things that you just get when you study a second or third Slavic language. There are going to be differences as well. So certain things surrounding genitives, certain things surrounding other cases where they will act in one way in one language and not in another, for sure. There are kind of cheats in some of these as well when you get to them. So, for example, in Czech, you have two ways of saying the numbers. So you can say the digit first and then the 10, or you can say the other way around. Depends on what you want to do. One way will change the grammar sometimes as well of the noun that follows or the adjective that follows, or both. So yes, there is a parallel that you can draw quite easily between many of them, except for Macedonian and Bulgarian, where there are no standard cases per se. There are dialects of both languages actually that have that the people of those languages who recognize that they speak a dialect of the standard language. Let me just try and rephrase this nicely. So there are people near the Serbian border in both Bulgaria and Bulgarian side, and also in Kumanovsky is the dialect, for example, where they have elements of cases, and these definitely look like the cases in the south of Serbia, the Serbian language varieties in the south of Serbia, where they also only have three cases. So that you do get that, but I mean that makes sense because there's a language continuum, right? So the languages and the standards of the different languages will be different, but the language continuum from village to village will still exist. So you will find that otherwise they don't. The standard languages, those don't have the cases, but they do have the remnants of cases in that you would make a difference between ya or yas or as in Bulgarian, as and yas in Macedonian, and then me, which would be the dative in both, and me, which would be the accusative in both. And then you would have a different word as well for, you could have moilt, which would be the kind of a genitive, possessive type version of that as well. But there are other things you can do too, but they do exist in those kinds of fossilized forms in both languages, but not as not in the standard language in kind of the way you see in Polish. But yeah, you'll see definitely when Polish speakers go to learn Czech, for example, what they'll do is they will compare the way that the case systems work, and they'll find it very easy. They typically learn it very quickly. So yeah, you'll find it's a lot easier. There are certain common things, for example, that they do and don't do, which will change. So, but you'll learn those quite quickly as well. Okay. There are plenty of advanced textbooks in many languages, but I've read few in the past. I found yet more motivation to use them on my own consumer media. Okay, let me see. Italo. Yeah, there are some languages that have some really good advanced books. Not all of them do. Salve, salve. Nice to see you. Okay. I'm starting Dutch and making good progress. Do you have any tips for Dutch specifically? For Dutch specifically, I mean, my advice would be quite old now, because I learned Dutch in the Netherlands and I studied it a little bit before that. This is many years ago now. And I used a course called Nederlands voor anderstaligen, Dutch for foreigners. And that was by a company called Prisma. And I found that quite useful. I bought it in the Netherlands and I went through that course. And then I used the NT2, which is the exam for Dutch for foreigners living in the Netherlands to pass. It's the exam that you need to pass if you want to work through the medium of Dutch. So I went through that course as well, and yeah, they would be the kind of the NT2 exam is something you can get books on and for, so that might be helpful as you get further into the language. But yeah, there are going to be newer courses out now. I'm guessing because things have moved on since I mean, I lived in the Netherlands between 2002 and 2004, so we're talking like 20 years ago. It's quite a while ago now. But yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. So let me just see if I've got another. I mean, in particular, it's absorbing all sorts of highly technical, scholarly vocabulary, expressions as well as structural ability and advanced grammar constructions. I'm a great devotee of Vladimir Nabokov, but he had great difficulty speaking, even though he had mastered the written style to a mind-boggling degree. Yeah, but very often happens that people will have different abilities in language. So some people will be able to write very well, and some will speak very well, and they don't always end up being the same things, right? I've taken classes in language school, Swedish, Norwegian, Japanese, but not yet for Russian. I want to go there and feel well first outside of a school setting. What would you recommend? Dank je, Frans. So, okay. You want to get your feet wet, outside of a school setting. So for Russian, I mean, it depends on if you have any other Slavic language knowledge. If you don't, it's always, the first Slavic language is always a little bit more daunting, I think, because you've got certain grammatical things that you may not see in other languages you speak. But you could possibly do something like looking at the courses, the general courses that you see. Again, I've not studied Russian for a long time because it was a language that I learnt in Moldova and had to speak there. But you could look at things like the Teach Yourself type style books, Teach Yourself or Asimil or colloquial Russian as well, as also a fairly good introduction to the language, and go through it that way. And then I would definitely be doing things like looking at things on courses and people who have podcasts or especially with transcripts online. We've got so many resources now where you can actually be part of a community where people learn and speak the language and use the same type of person. There are lots of those people on YouTube and on Instagram, and also on TikTok. So you could potentially find that. If you already speak German as well, there are people that do teach one language through another. So there are people who teach German, for example, through Russian, and that's always good to be able to practice the language. The other thing that you can do is to go through. Sorry, I'm getting a few little weird notifications about the internet connectivity here. So it's also possible to look at things like Link and go through their mini stories. Slowly but surely, it will start to make sense. You'll see the grammar in a sensible way as well, and it will explain things. It makes more sense, for example, than other apps that you can use, because the language is fairly standard. It's read out and you can highlight it and find out what's going on. So yeah, that would possibly be my starting point. È difficile per capire l'italiano della Sud. È difficile per capire l'italiano della Sud. Sì, a volte sì, per qualche persona. Cosa consiglieresti per migliorare l'interazione italiano? Fare esercizi di shadowing. Potrebbe essere, Ronaldo, perché no? Io penso quello che fa Luca, per esempio, se vuoi fare qualcosa con l'intonazione di una lingua, quello che fa lui va bene, l'esercizi che fa Luca, per esempio, scrivere, o trascrivere un audio o se c'è qualco scritto in italiano per indicare dove c'è, l'accento, dov'è l'intonazione, per esempio, naturale di un italiano. E così, si può sì imparare meglio, analizzando la lingua così di una forma, che veramente devi pensarci bene, attivamente come si può formare una costruzione importante in italiano o anche parlare in una forma più naturale. Quindi questo, ci vuole un po' di tempo, ma, ecco, un'idea che potrebbe essere utile per te, ci sono anche dei video su YouTube di Luca spiegando tutto questo, quindi se può anche trovare, un metodo così, per trovare qualcosa. Io direi anche se c'è un audio con una trascrizione già fatta, questo potrebbe essere ancora più utile per te perché già, la maggior parte del lavoro è già fatto per te. Ma è così. Abbiamo fatto anche all'università, questo era un lavoro all'università quando studiavo lingue lì, per indicare dove c'è, l'interazione. È come per esempio, ehm, usare non soltanto le parole, come ogni parola, ma anche in una struttura, o in una frase naturale in italiano o un'altra lingua. Questo vuol dire non soltanto per l'italiano, ma per tutte le lingue, è così. Quindi allora, vediamo, si biliyor, evet, hola, soy de Argentina. Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo hiciste para aprender un idioma en un mes? Anche un pues, es que aprender un idioma en un mes sí que sería casi imposible, ¿no? Pero bueno, para empezar a hablar sí que es posible empezar a decir algo, pero no. No se puede en un mes, no. Se puede empezar a hablar, pero no se puede aprender un idioma así completamente en un mes. Long time no see, regards from Stan. Hello, hello, 新年快乐，谢谢。Kung Hei Fat Choi, everyone. Nice to see you, Israel. Nice to see Happy New Year to you too. Hello, Richard. Which language took you the least amount of time to learn on a conversational level, and how long did it take you? I would say probably languages that are related to languages I was studying quite intensively. So to start speaking, I found Portuguese fairly straightforward to start speaking in the beginning because it was super similar to the Spanish I was learning for me, and that was probably the one that I found in the beginning at university, right? And then outside of that context, probably Slovak, but then my Slovak just disappeared again because I never used it. Have you got good around with? I've had a goof around with Chat GPT. What are your thoughts? I have had a little bit of a play with it, and yeah, it's fun. In fact, I used one of those chatbots in Memorize at their offices in September to practice speaking languages, and there were a couple of videos I think on the Memorize channel about that, sort of me practicing languages with them. So yeah, they exist, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. But that wasn't necessarily just written; it was also oral. They used it in quite a cool way. But yeah, I've played with it since it's become this big thing now as well. And absolutely, yeah, it's an interesting thing to sort of see coming online. I love that book. I have Nederlands voor anderstaligen. But you've got to pick which accent you want: Flemish or Nederlands. Best was Flemish. Yeah, absolutely. Ja, so Chanel. Ready to miss the live stream today, watching it now from the beginning. All the best to everyone here. Okay, nice to see you, Maurizio. I hope you catch up and you see my hello to you. Okay. Are you able to speak in different accents of the same language or native English included? Yes, I can. So I could speak in English. I can use different accents in some others as well, to more or less a degree. But yes, I can imitate accents in different languages. I find it quite fun. So much to the chagrin of my poor enduring family, who get driven crazy by me playing with accents all the time. But yeah, I like to do it. In fact, I made a TikTok where I tried to do this, but in a less showy way, but more in a to tell a story way. And I much prefer telling a story. I'm kind of not the, hey, look at me. It's not really my style so much. But yeah, I think it went under the radar fairly well, to be honest. But some people did notice that I was switching accents in English, and yeah, it was good fun. I like different accents. I like different ways of speaking. So for me, it's kind of a celebration of the linguistic diversity. So I mean, for me, it's never like imitating a different accent. For me, is kind of, it's because I want to, for a good reason, and it would never be for kind of like mockery or anything like that. I find it. Yeah, I think it's important to play with language. I think language is something that's playful and it's fun to play with them. And yeah, I think if we're conscious of why we're doing it and what we're doing it for, I think it's quite fun to do. Okay, this being a different accent. Let's see. How are you able to afford your immersion programs? You often do some short-term immersion projects, but for people who cannot afford to do these kinds of projects, how can they learn a language without them? I've not really done many of those kinds of immersion projects, really, to be honest. So trying to think of which ones you might be thinking of. But for example, yeah, with German, it was after I finished university, and I went and lived with some people who offered to let me stay in their place for free for the summer. So I did, and I ended up au pairing with a family in Germany that I met whilst I was there. And so yeah, that wasn't really an expense for me. It was actually cheaper than staying at home. So I ended up, yeah, just kind of working a little bit by helping out with the kids and learning the language and being in an environment where I spoke it. Other immersion things, really, the Netherlands, for example, and places like that where I studied or worked. Czech Republic, I studied Netherlands. I was on a contract as a network engineer for 2 years, and then in Spain and France and Italy, I was at university. And so yeah, I wasn't it wasn't like these sorts of immersion programs that you imagine now, I guess, where it costs thousands and thousands of pounds or dollars or whatever currency you use. It really wasn't. It was definitely way more affordable, and I've not done anything like that for a long time. I have based myself out of a place for a month to be surrounded by the language. That's something I've done, if that's what you mean. But that was not me doing an immersion project. That was me carrying on with normal projects and doing it from a different place. Do some languages require immersion in order to successfully learn them, like Chinese or Japanese? I think it helps sometimes to do. I'm not going to pretend that the immersion doesn't help. It can really help. But I've also met people who went to live in a country for several years and came away still not being able to speak the language very well, to their own sort of admission as well, because it's not an automatic thing, right? You have to make a big effort to learn a language well and to speak it all the time. Would you ever do a brain study to see if language learning has changed your brain? Yeah, why not? Tony, why not? Sorry for my weird question, but if through learning languages one also learns the mentality of people therein, I'm very curious, how do French people mentality differ from Hispanics worldwide? Don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, because I'm coming from a very British sort of mindset, right? So my original mindset is British, and so I have probably too much interference to be able to authentically answer that question. But yeah, there would be differences in kind of ways of talking and communicating, for sure. Do you ever experience information overload from learning multiple languages? Sometimes information overload, maybe not so much, but yeah, if I try and learn all the time and I've got other things to do, it can get a bit stressful, and I have to be very conscious of that. Sometimes sensory overload, if I'm in a place that's very touristy and I understand all the languages around me, if I'm exposed to that kind of thing too much, then it can, because my brain will tune in and out of all of the languages that are spoken around me, and it does it without me really trying or doing anything, and I find it hard to switch that off. So that can be a bit challenging sometimes. And I had that in the Czech Republic one summer where I rented a flat on one side of Charles Bridge and had classes on the other side of Charles Bridge, and I had to walk past hundreds and hundreds of tourists on a daily basis, all speaking languages from Europe, which I usually studied, and my head was like this all the time. It's like, it was slightly crazy, but I moved. Which language do you think is the luckiest when it comes to polyglot capacity? I've noticed people from certain languages have a very hard time with almost any language. I'm not sure what you mean is the luckiest when it comes to polyglot capacity. Oh, you mean like kind of as a base language to have? Well, pretty much every language would say that theirs is the best to have. This is the issue. It's quite a funny thing. Czech people always used to say this. Czech people are very proud of the language, and the language is very nice. But yeah, they would always say things like this: "Our language is the hardest, and we have the most difficult grammar, and we have the." Yeah, so we're very lucky that we speak Czech. But I've also heard that from other people as well, and I'm not sure. I'm really not sure, because then you have issues with not knowing how to use articles, for example, that for an English speaker are very ordinary and normal to use, and then in a language like Czech or Russian, it's quite hard to know how to use articles properly against the standard language. So yeah. Thank you for your videos. It was simple yet poignant. Thank you very much, Gabrielle. Thank you. I still don't speak Finnish, and I'd like to sometimes, but it's accepting that you don't need that much, as I tend to use Swedish official materials. Yeah, Joanna, absolutely. Yeah, you don't always need. This is the thing, right? It's accepting that you don't always need everything we think we need, and this whole idea of going for a C1 level or C2 level and everything. It's like, seriously, most people do not communicate using C1, C2 level language for most of the time during the day. Most conversations you could put in a book for B1, B2 learners, and they'd be appropriate level material. So I'm kind of very much a pragmatist when it comes to these things. Once you gave me some tips to talk to my little nephew in English. He's 2 years old and can say some words in English and some in Italian. It seems he chooses the easiest ones, but understands both. Absolutely, Giovanni, that's absolutely what children do. They choose the easiest route. We actually do as adults as well most of the time. It's just that sometimes we rationalize things and trying to take ourselves out of our comfort zone. But very often, for adults as well, it's a fight to not choose the easiest route. And children just don't rationalize it in the same way, because their brains need longer time to develop and to see how something might benefit them in the future, and how that extra work is actually valuable now. You can't really do that so easily with a child, whereas with an adult, sometimes it will work a lot more easily. What do I think of Link? I think it's good. I think Link's good. You're the best. Oh, thank you. Okay. So I'm getting, let me see. Že něho starého video, že si řekl pár slov česky, ano. A používají ještě někdy. Ano, konferenci ještě v Čechách, když mám možnost tam být v Čechách, ale nepoužívám hodně moc teďka, protože nemáme žádných Čechů v Macedonii, takže nemám s kým mluvit, takže, ale ano, chápu ještě, mluvím ještě trochu, no. To dá. Do you have any suggestions for textbooks, course materials with identical content in multiple languages? Very good question. Very good question. Professor Alexander Orgualis actually did a really good set of videos many years ago on this topic, on just looking at different textbooks, different courses, and sort of I'll give you this very brief rundown of the what that came to was the Linguaphone courses use the same types of material all the way through, and basically if you've been through a Linguaphone course in one language, you can very easily guess the meaning in another language because they use the same format and the same types of stories. So some things will be changed, but not a ridiculous amount, and so you can often you'll find that will help. Link, actually, the stories in Link are the same across the languages. I've been through, I want to say 24 of the Link language stories. I think it's 24. The only one I didn't go through, I think, that I didn't go through completely was Cantonese. I didn't listen to all of the Cantonese. I listened to a couple, but not all of them. But I did listen to all of the others. Some of them didn't have all 60 stories. Hebrew was one that didn't have all 60 stories, but there were others as well. But the actual stories are the same in each language in Link. So now that Link was mentioned, I will mention it again. Cool. So I think we've got to just over an hour. It was really, really nice to come back and talk to you all. I hope that my sound is better than it was in the past because of this new microphone. I hope it connected properly. Maybe it didn't, I don't know. And yeah, I will next week. I'm not sure I can make it because I'm going to be away next week for the weekend, but I hope to be back the week after, and then I will be as regular as I possibly can from then on. My plan is to be regular again for these lives, but also during next week I'm going to look at how I put together these chats where we can actually talk to each other as well on Zoom probably, and do sort of private talks with other people or just with me. And if you're interested in that, please reach out, let me know, and I can be in touch. You can sign up to the Patreon, and that's kind of where I will go from to do it. I will update that, and you will be able to join me live. And of course, you would also be welcome to join some language learning therapy sessions if you want to too, which are a lot of fun and take us to very specific answers to questions that you have about language learning. And until next time, have a wonderful start to your Year of the Rabbit, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you very much, and yeah, feel free to reach out to me on social media and ask me questions, and I will be happy to be in touch with you. Take care and good luck with your language learning. All the best, everyone. Bye bye.